Internet,
We are back
we are back.
in the new year.
Yes, happy 2020, everybody. Welcome to the future. Um, we have with us Inon Zur. Thank you so much for being with us today. We actually have a lot of fans of yours in our student body. We have a couple of our new students who are in the games program, and they're like, "Oh, you're interviewing that Fallout 4 was one of my favorite games. I love the music, so it's we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us."
It's super interesting to me because I mean it's one of those things that seems really obvious. I think when you say it, like, yeah, the music in games and movies functions pretty much, or not does it function the same way, but you kind of write it in the same way, or write it to kind of evoke emotion and kind of aid what you're seeing. So that seems like stuff that we don't necessarily think about as like consumers, right? Like, we're consuming the product, but then when you hear it come from someone who's actually behind it, it's like, yeah, that's obvious. And then the kind of the way you described kind of writing for video games, that was always something that I would wonder about when I started, I guess, paying attention to video game music. Is like, how do they know what's happening when, and like, how are they getting all of these musical movements correct, when I'm pretty sure, depending on the game, they may not have had anything to go based off of, or
So
maybe.
yeah, no, that's the issue. I mean, I'm working on some games that are more sort of like linear,
Yeah.
and so in this way, um, we could definitely predict what's going on,
Hmm.
and the gamer has pretty much one path that he or she will, proceed. Uh,
Hmm.
so that's a little easier to predict and to know, and thus the music will lead us there. But when it comes to games like Fallout,
Yeah.
for example, it's an open world,
Hmm.
and you could choose whatever you want.
Hmm.
So sometimes I will write music that we think it's going to fit one map, but then Mark says, like, you know what? Actually, I thought that later on in the game, um, it had a much better fit for this music. So I'm going to put the music in this map, you know?
Yeah.
And since it's an open world, I mean, basically all options are on the table when it comes to where to use the music, how to use the music.
Hmm.
So
Right.
on one hand, you know, you have just way more possibilities, but then it also needs way more music
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and a lot of implementation.
Yeah. So two things about that, because I kind of like what you described there. Just the amount of possibility that you have, I think on the surface can seem really exciting, because it's just like, I can do whatever I want. But I think it's kind of one of those things, like, I guess I relate it to music production, is like having every single plugin at your disposal, and you have this huge list of plugins, and it's like, cool, I can mess with everything here, but that kind of gets a little bit overwhelming after a while, and you kind of find yourself, I
I
guess,
mean,
just
and again, what helps you focus
hmm.
is, although you have a lot of ways and it's an open world and everything could happen, still the storyline
Hmm.
and what's going on is what guides you the most.
Yeah.
So you need to understand where you're coming from,
Hmm.
where are you now, and where are you going
Yeah.
to.
Right.
And that will actually never change. The way to achieve it in an open world game, there are tons of ways to achieve it. But according to your choices, this is exactly where you came from, where you are right now, and where you're going. And this is how the music operates.
Okay. So I kind of like the second part of that question, because you said you do need a lot more music. Do you maybe find yourself, I guess, writing more material than is needed or asked for, or do you kind of
Oh,
find
no,
yourself,
no.
no?
I mean,
No, please.
no, no. I mean, I'd love to write as much music as I can.
Hmm.
However, I mean, budget wise,
Right.
it's always challenging because games like Fallout has sometimes hundreds of gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
and possibly budget wise, and also, it's not practical to write so many hours of music.
Yeah.
The biggest game you could compose, music wise, is probably maybe 3 to 4 hours of music, and
Whoa.
that's like huge amount, but still
Mm-hmm.
it covers time wise just a fraction
Yeah, exactly.
of what the game needs.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many, many ways to extend music, to repeat music, to use stems, to use variations, to use
Mm-hmm.
parts, to use loops, and many times, smartly enough, just not to use anything.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah.
and really, because we're not crazy about wall to wall music, we believe that music is very, very different than the rest of the sounds and audio in game, which is continuous. There's no way,
Mm-hmm.
time that there's everything is quiet. However, music has its own realm, and it is living not in sort of like the practical reality part of the game, but more in the drama and emotional
Right.
realm
Mm-hmm.
of the game. So this is why music has to have a really good reason why to start, when to start,
Mm-hmm.
and when to stop,
Yeah.
because this really determines, from an emotional point of view and story wise, it's supporting the actual story. It's not just like a background. And this is why the smart audio um, director understands that music is not just part of like, oh, so there's foley, there's sound effects, and there's music. No,
Mm-hmm.
music is basically living on its own level, and will start when it's important, will stop when it's important, and this way it will make the optimum um, impact
Mm-hmm.
basically on the game from emotional point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We were talking to Jason Graves a little while ago about his work on Dead Space, and a lot of that game is like there's the jump scares, but then there's also the juxtaposition of like the silence of space,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like fitting your music to the theme, I guess. And it seems like in my experience, you've done really well with the Fallout games, also with the Dragon Age games. I loved the score. I played Dragon Age 2 a lot back when it was a thing, and I love that game. And the score, I listened to part of it recently, and it was just like, this makes so much sense for what you're dealing with, and it's emotional in the way that film scores are, but it's different because it has to be like modular in a way, as you said, like we're using loops and using cues. Did you find yourself using theme, like a recurring like leitmotif theme
Of
over?
course, the themes, like also what we called, the stylish signature, um, is what connects between all the music parts in the game. And this also helps the game to keep being organic and continuous. So, like I said, it is so important when the music starts, when the music stops. It is also very, very important what theme to use and where. I mean, and this has no difference between movies, TV, and games. So if you developed a special theme for like the main character, you have to really choose carefully where you play it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have chosen a theme for the bad guys, again, where to play it. You could play it in places that there are no bad guys at all, but it just gives you a little bit notion of, all right,
Yeah. I have to
Yeah,
pay
it
attention.
we're
triggers
we're
that anxiety. That anxiety.
Yeah.
so again, using thematic material is key. Again, for cohesiveness, continuous feel, and um, again, letting the player know where he or she are and what happened, and maybe what is about to happen.
Right.
So that kind of has a little follow up question to it because there is. It seems like a lot of the times you're working on series and you're being, called back for sequels. So, I guess do you find it difficult to kind of work on a game when a lot of the kind of main themes that you may be using have kind of been established from earlier releases? Like, let's say, you worked on like Fallout 3 and then coming into Fallout 4, is there kind of like a pressure to maybe bring back certain elements of the music or even reference the music, or are you kind of thinking in a whole new light about working on
Actually,
sequels?
I think it's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working on series, there is development,
Yeah.
and it's very, very cool to follow the development of the world
Mm-hmm.
with the music. For example, Fallout 3 was very, very dark, ominous, raw. Um, you could go even back to 1999 to Fallout Tactics.
Yeah.
Um, and this was like basically the nuts and bolts of Fallout. Everything was broken, and the music was also playing it. So it was just big, clangy, score to a very, very impressive, but basic and rugged game. In Fallout 3, it became more cinematic, but still very dark.
Mm-hmm.
Fallout 4 took a pretty big turn again, story wise, and became way more personal. Um, and this is why I'm featuring the piano, uh, because it's all about the story of this character that we see right now on the screen.
Right.
Um, and it actually warms up. There are lots of like sort of like heartfelt moments in Fallout 4.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to address that.
My
Um,
king.
you know, um, and Fallout 76 is again totally different because it's all about rebuilding.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the music again is constructed and the style totally changed. Of course, and it's such a cool thing to take these themes that I wrote many years ago and put them inside the new context
Yeah.
and the new style that we are developing right now for the new game. So this is really, really awesome to do.
Yeah. That's one of the cool things. It's kind of like I guess if I relate this to just like music for listening and stuff like that, I guess not attached to games or movies, is oftentimes you'll have like a favorite artist that you can kind of identify right off the bat based on kind of the different sounds that they're using, or maybe a certain kind of intro loop. So I guess that's kind of like the cool thing about video games. Like I guess you hear like dee 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 dee, and you automatically know like that's Mario, or like how you have videos on the internet of like high school kids singing the Halo theme in like locker rooms, right? Like I just don't feel like stuff like that happens by mistake, and just based on what you've talked about, throughout the interview, there's a ton of care that gets put into these games, like besides just like, does it sound good? Like, how epic can we make this string section or whatever?
Well, the main thing about the music of these successful and huge franchises is really to develop a signature sound, signature theme, and like you said, something that anybody or many people will listen and right away they will know, oh,
yeah,
this
This is a Fallout game.
This is Fallout. As soon as you hear that, it's like, we're playing
and
Fallout.
when you get to this, when you really are able to identify and create a style that is so unique and connected so well for the game, then you've succeeded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So-
this is the real challenge about creating music for most games, but specifically for these unique franchises like Fallout,
Yeah,
like
right.
Sekiro, like Dragon Age.
Do you find yourself, I mean, I know it's a big kind of collaboration, but do you find yourself kind of knowing when something just kind of is just right? Or do you, have to kind of bounce it back and forth between other people? Is it more of a thing where, I think there was I can't remember exactly who we talked to, but he talked to in regards to kind of making themes and composing for music, that at a certain point he just kind of knows what's going to work and just like doesn't listen to anybody's opinion, just kind of like, here, this is going to the audio department.
No, that actually never really happens.
No.
Because, I mean, as a composer, especially with games, you're a team player
Mm-hmm.
and you're part of the team.
Yeah.
And plus, in many, many cases, you don't get to see the game at all.
Oh, geez.
Things are so secret and
Right.
sometimes so early in development
Mm-hmm.
that you don't have a way to test it. So if somebody's telling you, hey, I know this is right, so screw everybody else, we're going with this. No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
First, the people that are creating the game are the only functions or only people that could really determine what works and what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I can recommend stuff, and just by writing stuff, I am already giving them what I think is good.
Yeah.
Right.
I won't say that at some points there are some eureka moments,
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
but you'll be surprised that sometimes something that I see as a eureka, they says like,
Not so much.
Yeah.
but it doesn't really work for the game.
Mhm.
So it's, well, after so many years working in a team, we know each other so well, so it really helps that these moments will not occur. But working on a new, like for example, I'm working on a huge, massive first-person shooter right now that will be out this summer. I cannot really say what.
I was
but-
going to say, we'd like to know, but I'm sure.
Yeah.
Secret.
But this was actually a company that I didn't work before, a very,
Okay.
very known company. And again, I cannot say which.
Mm-hmm.
But it's totally new franchise. And since it's a totally new franchise, it took us a few months really to understand, and going back and forth between styles, what really working for the game.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I got to see a lot of the game, still my opinion matters some,
Yeah.
but like it is a collaborative process.
Right.
Ooh.
That makes sense.
So yeah.
So when you're working, with people that you've known for a while, like since you've been working with the same team for a while, do you end up leaving less of the music on the cutting room floor? Because I know a lot of the time they're like, oh, this doesn't work. Can you make a different theme or make a different track for this or whatever? But if you've been working with someone for so long, I feel like you would get to know their tastes.
It surely helps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Surely helps, and there's less hit and miss.
Yeah.
Right.
There are always revisions
Mm-hmm.
because I have my own taste, and
Right.
Mark Lampert has his own taste. Fred from Bethesda Montreal has his own taste, and I will always start by applying my own taste.
Yeah.
Right.
And so sometimes it will, they will say, all right, we like this angle, we like this part, but this part we think needs to change. It just doesn't work for them. And I will change it. I mean, there's no ego games here. The composer needs to provide something that audio director will be 100% sure that it works perfectly in the game. So that's why, I almost never really argue about anything.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so I guess we can kind of lead this into some other questions about you. So, kind of talking about that, what are some like major influences for you that kind of inspired your style of composing? Um,
I grew up in Israel,
okay.
um, and since very very early age, my parents would play classical music, and it's from Bach through Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, Stravinsky, Prokofiev. Um, so this was sort of like my main inspiration when I grew up. I didn't know other type of music.
Yeah.
When I got to my teens, then I started listening to other music, to rock. I must say that still to date, and I'm familiar with many, many, many type of music. The Beatles is one of my main influence,
Wow. Nice.
Nice.
and they definitely stand apart from almost from the rest.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah.
other main like Queen and other, definitely makes a lot of influence. Genesis in their good days, Police and stuff, and then comes jazz. And I've been introduced when in my late teens and early 20s to jazz. And in fact, the reason why I came to the United States in the first place is to become a jazz pianist.
Oh
I
wow.
didn't think,
Really?
yeah, because
Damn.
I really, because I was playing piano for a long time. I played all the classical stuff, and then I started, I got to know jazz, and I just loved it. And until today, I'm infatuated by jazz. I
Mm-hmm.
love playing jazz, and I love Herbie Hancock, Charlie
Nice.
Parker,
Sweet.
I
Yeah.
mean, everybody, Thelonious
Some
Moon,
real cool
you know.
cats.
So, so all these, people totally influenced me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Later on in my career, I started listening to scores.
Oh wow.
Uh,
Okay.
so again, I let it influence me. I let John Williams teach me what, in his music, what's really cool
Mm-hmm.
in thematic writing and orchestrating. I
Dun, dun,
let Thomas
dun.
Newman teach me in his music how it's so cool when things are so simple,
Yeah.
but yet you create a layer of harmonic music that is just working so well. Um, I let Johan Jönsson teach me in his music what really works when you are using minimalistic approach and very synthetic approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really learning from a lot of people and let myself be influenced, and I'm not being afraid not to influence and not to copy,
Mm-hmm.
but to restate some ideas that other composers are using, because at this point of my life my style is so definitive and hammered that everything that I will take will already take an alteration into
Your personal
my
tone.
style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you talked, and that was actually one of the questions on the list. So I guess I'll just go ahead and skip the next one and just kind of dig into that a little bit more. But
I had
like,
a question actually.
all right, yeah.
Do you are there any of your contemporaries that you take influence from, or that you look up to, or maybe not specifically look up to, but like that you hear their scores and you're like, oh man, I wish I would have thought of that, or this is that you appreciate.
Contemporary, you mean like film composers, for example?
Film or game?
I'm again open to not almost to every style of music, and specifically scores, because this is what I do. And I like to listen in my free time, which I don't have a lot, um, to scores for games and for movies. And it almost doesn't really matter who did it. There's some composers that I will favor over other composers, but sometimes in a score that I didn't have any expectation from, suddenly I hear like a bit that really captures me and captured my imagination. It's like, wow, that could be a great idea and element that I could reuse, or some stuff that I'm like being influenced. Like, for example, a lot of I think cues. I remember that we were talking about the amazing score for the movie There Will Be Blood.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Is very, very edgy and modern sounding. And I definitely listened to this score a lot when wrote music for Fallout 4. Um, so I let myself being influenced
Hmm.
by these things. It always helps.
Nice. Yeah, now I'm gonna have to go watch There Will Be Blood and play some Fallout 4 and see if I can find the similarities here.
See the
Right? I was
comparison.
like, I see what you did here. Um,
Sure.
so yeah,
It's like
that's
John Williams said, it's like, of course I copied, but I copied from the best.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Also, that you say that because Jason Butler, our production arranging teacher, is also, I would say brilliant pianist, keyboardist, and I think it's something that he recently started doing a little while after he got here. Is like, listening to a lot of film scores, right? And I guess for him, just because he's maybe in a different part of his musical journey, maybe a little bit more advanced, but listening to the things that he was picking up in the music were very subtle, right? And I guess I'm used to listening for subtlety, but in different ways. And he's kind of talking about like, oh, listen to how like this top line is going, and then listen to the chords underneath and how those are kind of working together. And you never really, you never really pay attention to stuff like that, I think.
As a musician, we always, and a composer,
Hmm.
when we hear music, we always see inside.
Yeah, it's like you're looking through it.
Look
You're not
through
seeing it
it,
for like what it is on the
to
surface.
identify, the elements.
Hmm.
This is what we do.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about piano. So I guess piano is your main instrument. Do you play any other instruments?
I mean, all the time, like it's like
Hmm.
Fallout,
Oh.
for example.
Yeah.
I mean,
We've
like,
got him right here.
not that
Right?
I know how to play with it so much, you know. Um, uh, but
Oh, man.
Nice. That's awesome.
um,
Damn.
so but I'm using sort of like my very limited knowledge in playing woodwinds, playing guitar,
Hmm.
and playing everything to create what I think could be cool.
Yeah, I think sometimes,
That's great.
I guess it's kind of difficult to put into words, but I think sometimes when you aren't necessarily the best at a specific instrument, but have, I guess, a background in music, I really kind of like the things that people come up with, like, non-guitar players, playing guitar after playing maybe woodwinds for years and years. It's like, music, but your approach to the
I
instrument
think it's a
is
very
going to
good
be,
point. Yeah, I think it's
unique.
a very good point because,
Hmm.
like, as somebody that is really great at an instrument knows it's inside out, and sometimes it's the problem
Yeah, right?
because because I could go like this,
Yeah, right? Somebody's going to be like, why are you doing
you know.
that?
So and it's
Hey,
like,
Nate.
no, don't do it.
Yeah, right?
So you got to understand that part of composing and part of creating a unique style is trying to think outside the box and thinking in an original way.
Hmm.
And I mean, so a lot of music, but on the flip side, sometimes you really need to stoop it up
Yeah, yeah.
and really approach stuff from a primitive way,
Yeah.
and it really helps to bring a very fresh ideas, into the palette.
Yeah, that's kind of like a big thing I tell a lot of my students. I'm the sound design 201 teacher here. And you know, a lot of the times during 101, they're kind of spending a lot of time like learning really, I guess not rules, but kind of, you know, the general things that people tend to do when sound designing. You know, you're kind of learning in a very structured way, and then they get to 201. I'm like, guess what, guys? All that stuff you learned in 101 is cool, but I'm about to make this sound right now by just, you know, turning all the knobs up on this VST, right? And then, you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but on the times that it works, you kind of see their faces like, oh, why wasn't I just thinking about this in a way of like, I'm just going to break this VST and see what it spits out. It's kind of like, yeah, the same thing we were just talking about with an instrument.
So, but
you know?
in order to do these things, I believe first you really need to know all the rules.
Yeah, you have to learn.
Because
you
when
know, the
somebody
basic.
doesn't know the rules, they don't really know when it's broken.
Appropriate,
And there
right?
are reasons for rules. Rules
Mhm.
basically is what runs us.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call it. It's not rules. It's understanding concept.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And when there is like a concept, there is a good reason
Yeah.
why people are using a concept.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could go and break the concept. You could go, but in an essence, the idea behind all these conceptual thing is you could always go and lean
Yeah.
back and use them as a backup if things really doesn't work, because you know that they are working for sure.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, it's like this is my tried and true, but let's see if we can try this.
And you can figure out maybe why it's not working a lot easier as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, you should not be afraid to break the rules. But in order to break rules, you really need to know inside out all the rules. Like, for example, from music point of view, you could do any harmony you like, okay? But in order to create really advanced harmony, you need to learn all the traditional harmony.
Yeah.
And then advance to other elements and know the historical paths of music. This way you have this in your toolbox,
Mm-hmm.
and you could use this. And then if you want to break it, at least you know what did you break.
Yeah, right. It's
Yeah.
like this is what I did here. Instead of kind of coming up to it by chance, right?
And
Right.
part of that's what you were saying about the harmonies is really interesting too, because when we were talking to Austin Wintry, he was talking about how he's really into 12-tone music, and we're like, 12-tone is so heady, I guess, for lack of a better word. But one of the questions we usually ask on these interviews is, what is your relationship like with theory? But I imagine yours is, you know, pretty
Extensive,
extensive
especially if you're doing
considering
jazz piano.
Yeah, jazz
But-
pianist.
so here's the difference, and it's just about the intonation
Mhm.
and the way I say it. I'm writing music in a 12-tone series music, or I'm writing music
Yeah.
in a 12-tone series. So basically, these are all tools and techniques.
Right.
Problem with some people that they just really sort of like sanctifying the techniques and making the technique their music.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They need to understand that music, first and foremost, needs, like any other form of art, music needs to tell a story, A. B, music needs to communicate. C, music needs to connect with other people. All
Yeah.
right. And if you can follow ABC, meaning you're telling an interesting story, okay, you and then you're connecting with people, and basically you follow all these rules,
Mm-hmm.
then you could use any techniques you want in order to do it. But you need to understand that first and foremost, you have to write something that is interesting and meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Damn.
Deep.
That was.
That's
Man.
it seems obvious when you say it, but it's really like a lot of people kind of take music for granted, I feel
Yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
especially in, the modern era where streaming and, it's so easy to access music. And I'm not saying that's bad. It's great that people are able to get access to the music that, a lot of people you wouldn't have heard before. You wouldn't have been able to hear all the random stuff that's on SoundCloud or on Spotify or whatever. But um, that I guess the definition of what makes it good or what makes it important is it's not it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way, I guess.
Well, again, let's go back to the Beatles.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What makes the songs of the Beatles, in one hand, so catchy, but in the other hand, every time you listen to them, they're always fresh
Yeah.
because they're able, A, to tell a good story, you know, B, being interesting and communicative, you know, you understand what they say,
Mm-hmm.
and very well connected with as many people as they can because they tell a story that many people could identify it, and they're
Yeah.
doing it in an original way, and they were not afraid to break any rules.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
So again, if you think about this when you're writing music, then you could use either Bach harmony or 12 tone series or just weird electronic beeps.
yeah.
But the difference between good music and not so good music is if it matters to somebody that hears it,
Mm-hmm.
if it really moved somebody, if it really caused somebody to think or to feel.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think cool about video games because kind of like Dylan said, I think a lot of people do take just music in general for granted. Like, it's always around, it's always going to be there. I don't necessarily have to look super hard to find stuff that I really like.
Mhm.
But one of the main things that I think, get excited about is, I guess, seeing non-music people or people that music isn't necessarily their hobby get so psyched about like music and games and film and TV to where someone that is not necessarily, I guess, actively listening to music then takes like this active listener role and is getting really excited about it.
Mhm.
I think that's one of my favorite things to see, and I think that's what makes video games and TV especially special because it does kind of not, I guess, force the listener to become active in what they're hearing and really feeling and thinking about
Yeah,
it.
we call it an active listener,
Yeah.
but this is also the difference between a gamer and a moviegoer and a TV
Mm-hmm.
watcher because the TV watcher and the moviegoer will just sit back and watch the film. By the time that the gamer needs really to be active all the time
Mm-hmm.
because he or she are part of what's going on, and they also make things happen.
Yeah.
And that's why the music in games always matters a lot because it's part of not only what is there but also what it's about to become,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because things are evolving and the player is actually making these
Yeah, you're
things
making it happen.
evolve. Exactly. And the
Mm-hmm.
music actually following that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, when you're listening to music in games, they always have a lot of attitude.
Yeah.
And they're very, music is very opinionated.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and also, um, one of the reasons why there are lots of um, concerts and huge concerts of game music and way more than film music programs in concerts is because music for games really tells the whole story
Yeah.
since it doesn't need to be connected to a picture.
Mm-hmm.
We could do like a classical treatment of a piece of music:
Right.
intro, main melody, presentation, development, recapitulation. All these things could come to play, and so that's why it's much easier to present it to the
Mm-hmm.
audience.
I really want to see the
Final Fantasy.
no the
orchestra, or
Zelda
the Zelda. Oh,
There you go. Yeah.
the Symphony
right?
of the Goddess.
That seems
Yeah.
crazy.
But yeah, I mean that does it's I feel like it's not something that people necessarily think of right off, which is it's funny too because when I first came to Pyramind as a student before I started working here, it was like I was telling people I want to do music for games, and they're like, "Oh, like I never even considered that as a career."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I don't. I feel like a lot. And honestly, I didn't either when I first started like getting into music. But then it's like, oh, like
Somebody's gotta do
everything,
it.
yeah, everything. Even your mobile games have some kind of music in it, and it may not be the big symphonic or as immersive as something like Fallout or Zelda, but it's still got to serve a purpose.
Well, yes, but some of these actually mobile game really has a very, very um, evolved and interesting and huge score. Like for example, Elder Scrolls Blades
Oh
that
yeah.
Is for mobile. We recorded the Budapest Symphony for it.
That's awesome.
Right?
So yeah. I mean, today mobile game definitely are packing a punch, and they have a lot of capabilities to present really great quality of audio.
Yeah.
For
Right.
sure.
Yeah, I guess it like the ability to kind of have high fidelity in a mobile game, especially now, is just why not record in orchestra, right?
Of course.
So that brings me to another question. As far as maybe software, what you're using in the studio, what's your kind of DAW of choice? And how often are you finding your scores kind of taken out of the computer and being played by orchestras or small?
I would say it's about 50%,
50%? All right.
between MIDI only and orchestra, because some games just don't have the budget or don't have the need
Right.
for an orchestra, and you could create here. You could basically see here, if I'll
Hello, Wolfie boy.
zoom here. So my go-to is Cubase.
Cubase.
Nice.
Um, and I'm working with 4 slaves, which you could see here on screens, and each one of them has the Vienna Ensemble Pro.
Damn.
Jeez.
And,
Your computer must be powerful.
well, no, I mean I have the main Mac is for Cubase, and there are another Mac as a slave and another 3 PCs, powerful PCs, with slaves. So as far as mixing goes, music is running through API Summing Machine, and into a mainly massive passive, and then back to the computer, so it sounds really warm and nice.
That's so cool.
That's like, this is probably my favorite setup I've seen.
Yeah, this one
I've
is-
got 4 computers doing everything. Like, I've got like the Manly going through. That's
so awesome.
Awesome. All right. All right. Let me calm down from that. I'm shaking.
It's funny too because we see, we're told a lot of the time that Pro Tools is always industry standard, but more and more we see people using Cubase.
Yeah, Cubase and Reaper.
Well, I do work with Pro Tools, and actually the computer over there is Pro Tool machine. And basically when we're recording any orchestra, all the recording is going through, on Pro Tools.
Yeah.
So what we'll do, the mixing will be made by Cubase, actually syncing and driving Pro Tools. So because there are always some MIDI elements, and so we will play Cubase, it will drive the Pro Tools, and this is how we mix.
Damn.
That's awesome. It's very involved, but it's really I don't know. I guess it seems efficient.
Yeah.
It's very efficient because when you record the orchestra, then you replace some of the MIDI instruments with the orchestra, and you leave some other MIDI instruments.
Right.
Now, what happened, the way the other MIDI instruments stay there played to the MIDI orchestra sometimes doesn't really fit volume-wise, style-wise, or even the actual part. So the fact that we're using the Cubase not as stems, but live MIDI tracks makes me able to change the MIDI according to what the orchestra played
Yeah.
Right.
and fit it better inside the new mix.
Damn. That is super cool.
Yeah.
So I have kind of a question because one of the guys I talked to on Discord is a composer, and I think he was working on Mortal Kombat 11 with NetherRealm Studios, and said that they've completely transferred over to Reaper. And there's a lot of people using Reaper nowadays, at least in the games industry. And I'm wondering, have you ever messed around with it, or do you know or see other composers kind of using it?
I heard here and there still Cubase and Logic are at the top of the DAW.
He's a Logic user.
So Cubase and Logic, it's pretty much half and half, or or 40%, 40%, 20% are still using DP.
Oh, wow.
Actually, no, some people are still using DP. Some people actually are composing on Pro Tools. And there is some pretty good MIDI capabilities in the
newer one, yeah.
Right.
I was gonna say, like,
so some people find it okay. I must say that I was a Cubase person since, I want to say, 1989.
That's like when they kind of started, right?
Actually, Cubase was still called Steinberg.
Yeah, Steinberg.
The first time when they came, and there was an Atari dedicated computer that had a version of, they didn't call Cubase, called Steinberg. And then after it, it became, I think, either C-Lab or and then became Cubase, and eMagic became Logic. So there you go, like, history of how these things evolved. But except of like a very short time, I was always a Cubase user and really happy with it.
Man, yeah, that's really cool. So Cubase and Logic, kind of the main ones. Let's break some hearts now. How often do you see Ableton in your field of work?
Okay, so here's what I say. It doesn't matter which DAW you're using. Really. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Whatever works for you, whatever makes your workflow the best, whatever less standing between you and the music, this is what you should use. It doesn't matter. I mean, use GarageBand as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, people do. Yeah, I've heard of professionals like using GarageBand, for singles and stuff like that.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, you have a job to do, and this is to write the best music you could come up with. And the softwares are your supportive and your toolbox, and they just need to fit who you are. So you identify that, and you just go with it.
So Greg mentioned you only have a limited time, so please let us know if we're going to run overtime.
We're running a little bit over time right now, so if anybody, like if there are any questions from audience that you could see, or any people that want to...
the chat has mostly just been saying, this is awesome. Hello, thank you. We haven't had any questions yet. If anyone in the chat, there's about 9 people in here right now. If any of you have any questions, now is your time. Right. If not, I have 2 final questions. One, what was your first game console? And 2, what was the first album you bought with your own money?
Good question. First game console actually was not a game console. The first games that I played was on a PC.
Okay.
So this is how we played games like before.
Yep. Or now still.
Now, of course, but this is what we did. The first album I bought with my own money probably was in, I would say 1986 or 7, when I was still in the middle of the army services, and because before I just didn't have money because I grew up in a kibbutz, and in kibbutz you don't have money.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got off the kibbutz, finally I started working and get my own money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was probably some of like classical string quartet, like maybe I would say could be a Schubert string quartet, or we did these kind of like classical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember myself then going and really excited about buying The Lamb Lies Down, by Genesis.
Yeah. Awesome.
Or some like really dark stuff from David Sylvian or Morrissey.
Ooh, Morrissey. Okay.
Really, up and running and big in Tel Aviv these days.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Great. Okay, well, no
everybody's
questions
just
from
like,
the chat.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, everyone's saying they love it. Great experience, lovely interview. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being with us. We really appreciate it. If you are in town for GDC, we'd love to meet up. Maybe have you like.
Yeah, sure. Let's keep in touch.
Mhm.
I don't have yet a form because there's just a lot going on, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
If it's going to be a reason that I'm not going to go to GDC, it's just like the schedule doesn't allow.
Yeah.
So,
And a lot
I'll be there at least 1 or 2 days.
Okay.
So let's keep in touch, and I'd love to see you guys and pop into Pyramind and say hi.
Great.
Yeah. Sweet, man.
Well, good luck with those projects you can't tell us about. We hope to hear
Summer.
about them in the future.
Summer.
Yeah, in the summer.
keeping
We're
an eye out
waiting.
in summer.
And again, just thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank you
Enjoy your
so
day.
much.
All right.
All right.
Later, Inon.
Cool. Later.
Bye.
Bye.
God damn that studio setup.
Yeah, dude. That was.
God damn.
I'm so moist.
It was so cool. We're still live, right?
Good. Good. They need to know. No. But that was
so crazy.
It's like, yo, I've got like,
Yeah,
I
like-
didn't hear him the first time. I was like, oh, so he's got a Mac? Why does he have one Mac?
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask him, like, so what are you using for those Vienna ensembles? He's like, I've got 4 slave PCs.
I know.
Like, bruh.
Bruh.
That's
How?
a lot of power.
Why? That's amazing.
That was
so cool.
Ugh. I want a studio like that.
I know. Also, Fallout 4, objectively better than Fallout 3.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's
I hated Fallout 3. I like Fallout 4.
Fallout 4 is cool.
Also, I don't know if you noticed, but wearing this
dress?
this sexy red dress my dude's wearing gives me +2 charisma.
Yeah, that's the Eris strat.
Is it really?
He only wears like sexy nightwear because it gives him like more charisma. He does charisma and luck builds, or he like does a bunch of
that's
luck
great.
builds and gambles a bunch. Gets kicked out of the casinos.
Fair enough.
Anyway, that was fun.
That was fun. Yeah. Sorry we had a short one this time, but he has obviously a bunch of stuff to take care of. Big man composer work.
Yeah.
We should message like all these people for GDC or something and see
right?
what we can pull off.
So the dude I was talking about that works at NRS, he's the guy that knows Pyramind. I still don't know his name. But
He's in your Tekken Discord?
Yeah, he's gonna be at GDC, so we're gonna meet up and
Hell yeah.
hang out and shit. So yeah, if we can get like all the people that we've kind of interviewed and see what's up during GDC,
Mash them
that
together
would-
in one room and
Yeah.
make them fight to the death. Wait,
Yeah,
I mean-
compose to the death. I want to cry. That's in a couple weeks. When is that?
March,
March. Yeah, a couple weeks basically.
technically. 8-ish.
It's every year that passes, time starts to go by fast.
I realized that 2017 was 3 years ago, and I want to cry.
Yeah, right. Like I'm thinking about 2019 now, and it's just like that was nothing.
It was so fast.
That was the fastest year, like other than 2015, which is the year I went to Pyramind. Shouts out to Pyramind.
Right here.
Yeah, we're obviously shouting out to Pyramind
Because
streaming
we're
from
on the
Pyramind's
channel. Follow
Twitch
these
channel.
things. Also follow Mario on these things. Also follow me on these things.
I was like, how do you know that you got to put that in after the video? I'm thinking like YouTube.
Nah, it's right here.
But yeah, it's what was I saying?
Time moves entirely
Oh
too
yeah,
fast.
time moves entirely too fast because 2015, I was a Pyramind student, and that year was just like, poof. And then I got hired here, and that year was like, poof. But then last year was insanely fast. It's like you blink.
Yeah, I got hired here, and then now all of a sudden it's been forever.
Right? It's like I was thinking about like how did I bring in the new year last year? I was like, oh yeah, we were on a cruise, and then like I started thinking about like the general experience, and I was like, I felt like that was like a couple months ago.
I know.
Right? Like so weird.
I was talking to someone recently who I haven't seen since 2017. And I was like, it seems like that was recent.
Yeah,
but
right?
It wasn't. It really was not.
That was 3 years ago.
Fucking crazy.
Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching, tuning in. Thank you all for following.
Real work now.
Yeah, we got to go do actual person work, which sucks. I just want to keep doing this and keep playing Fallout.
My baby. Where's my baby?
Yeah, where's my son?
I
Where's
want my family
I
back?
want my family back. So again, follow Pyramind on these things down here. Follow Mario at these
Those
ones
things
right
right
here,
now.
and then follow me over here with these things. We appreciate you guys. We will see you. We have an interview with Carl. I don't know how to pronounce his last
Carl.
name. Floating. I'm gonna go with floating.
We're gonna interview Carl.
It's very Nordic, but he is a super nice guy. He worked on Totally Accurate Battle Simulator.
No way.
Yeah.
I've been watching YouTube videos of that
I
because it's
think
been
that's
recommending.
the game. Yeah, I think that's the game we should play.
Yeah.
And he did the Kickstarter for Super Hot.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
Damn.
So that's gonna be next. We're still working out times with him, but you will
Be on the lookout.
You will see us here, and we'll see you back here next time. Until then.
Deuces.